You might hear some of that in our own epiphanies. I'll just read the bottom of the abstract before we get started, and we'll present in the order of appearance. Dr. Himika Bhattacharya from Syracuse, she could not be with us today. She's here in spirit, but she's in India caring for a parent and also grieving the loss of her father. So we're thinking about her even as we're talking about Denzin today. So a writer, scholar, teacher, and visionary. Denzin was a mentor to generations of faculty and students. And we, the panelists, will share reflections about him and we'll draw from epiphanic moments of our memories as him being a mentor, an advisor, as well as a friend. And we'll recall some methodological approaches, representational forms, and the kind of political informed perspectives that resonated with us throughout our professional and our personal relationship with Denzin. And I'm first, which I'm incredibly nervous, and I'll try to get through this without crying every time, even when I reread it. It was still there, so bear with me. But my piece is called Snow Globe. Because it's a long time, I'm gonna put on my glasses. Snow Globe. Shaken. I crossed the corner threshold during an August cold campus climate to peep, albeit hesitantly, the rumored second floor, third space of intellectual wonder, where another Illinois bear cooked up homemade, historically rooted recipes of interpretive cultural studies and critical qualitative inquiry. In a tiny galley kitchen-sized office, arm's length cookies were stashed catty corner with a vintage typewriter, along with stacked stuff that always risked avalanching, just like the jagged mountains of weathered and freshly pressed books whenever he'd turn, he'd stretch or tower to retrieve them. The books crammed every office crevice where there were no people, no pastel-dyed snow-dusting piñatas or student-gifted global knickknacks frozen in time and space on the open shelves overhead. I'd sit with 4 other aspiring graduate methodologists in that back galley, bumping back chairs and clacking keyboards, practicing Congress conjuring and journal apprenticing as Diana crawled. Billy belted strange fruit and Tracy talked about revolution. My Southern Black self could not fathom this white Midwestern magic, even on the inside. It'd be back on the outside, on the professor side, on that defunded humanities anchored other side, that I could truly recognize this man, an unmoved man, who, with the power of his own voice, could make qualitative, tectonic shifts in how we think, how we write, how we enact memory, culture, and identity. So I want to revisit there. The cultivated space of self-making and her storying what Denzin defined epiphanies that I've treasured for 20 years since I crossed that second floor threshold. And remembering this ardent academic agitator, I recall how he not only demystified research and defied disciplinary boundaries for me, but he also demanded that I bring my thinking, feeling body, my local self stories to an affirming, creative intellectual space where our collective commitment to co-make, in his words, a more humane, pluralistic, anti-racist, and just world would outweigh the petty academic demands or even our personal professional pursuits. He made me He made me believe that I could write and I could set right the world that I wanted to inhabit. Norman K. Denzin was a man of his time, ahead of his time, really. In his writings, he wrestled with an Iowan childhood innocence of playing cowboys and Indians that reenacted settler colonial violence. He wrestled with the privileged space of unknowing to the arresting race ones of remembrance and interpretive interactionist rereadings of culture that charted for me his own kind of anti-racist becoming. He'd returned to that Iowa childhood and to the American mythology of the West to unpack his own whiteness with his move to Montana. And Montana was less of a retreat to a simpler state than it was a place to grapple with the haunts of history that continued to shape him, to shake him, to call him to write and rewrite what was and what could be with performance ethnography, to remix official and folkloric retellings with personal memory by adapting my stories, and by practicing a form of decoloniality by bridge building with BIPOC scholars to unsettle, if not dismantle, the dominant taken for granted ways to present and to represent so-called expert knowledge. And it was in his class where I could see my academic self, my artist self, my activist self. It was there where I could read June Jordan and Audre Lorde and Anna Deavere Smith as poets, as playwrights, and as theorists. It was there where I would participate in post-class pizza shop talk that once extended an entire semester of self-guided talk with just Denzin's books and our words. And there I began to bring my whole self to the page with my Virginia drawl, dragging Timberland boots and my daddy Army issued Vietnam jacket and a tiny tee with iron-on graffiti that said "Shrew Bush, Chain is a dick," to contest and protest in community spaces and in the classroom, the idea that business could be usual at the dawn of the so-called war on terror. And in his class, there was no turning back to an off-ecstatic beingness of who am I in some forms of depoliticized autoethnography. No, I began to craft my own critical autoethnographic metamorphosis to consider, how am I? How am I even here in this moment? At this time, carrying the freedom dreams of my mother and my other mothers and Denzin with me. Shaken. I am shaking. I am shaking. He is no longer here, but I believe I can revive and live out his hope for a new world and word and indeed. And indeed, I hold this truth on the other side. In my Florida office, I stacked Denzin books like mountains in a snow globe of memories to remind me of what he used to tell me, that I have a voice and that we all have a choice, an aesthetic, moral, ethical, and political choice in how we use our voices right here, right now, and right at this moment. And 20 years since that August cold when we first met, and the August 2023 when we learned that he left us in power and with peace, I am still shaken, but I remain unmoved. Thank you. Told y'all. Thank you.
Thank you, Aisha. That was just beautiful.
Thank
I'm
you.
crying with you.
Thank you. And our next panelist is Celiany Rivera Velázquez from Hunter College.
Good morning, everyone. I love you, Aisha. Thank you for that piece. You inspired me. In the summer of 2001, as a 21-year-old recent graduate from the University of Puerto Rico, I embarked on a journey that shaped my academic and professional future. The University of Illinois Summers Opportunity Research Program assigned me Norm as a mentor. I fell in love with him as soon as I met him because if you've seen him, you know he gives main character vibes, right? So I'm like, this is my person. He's gonna lead me. He was more than a mentor. He was a guiding force, holding the door open for me to step into academic research and scholarly pursuit, and always encouraged me to not follow a traditional path. Hence, what I am an independent scholar. I do not work within the tenure track system. My research has been used for advocacy and towards the LGBTQ community in this context of the Spanish-speaking Caribbean. He was very adverse to academic formalities, and I loved that that was his mentorship style, as that really allowed me to defy traditional boundaries. It was him who saw potential in my undergraduate honors thesis, which was a comparative analysis of two films, Tu Wan Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar, and Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, which I felt so insecure about. And he allowed me to turn it into a scholarly piece that then he used to advocate that it was worthy of being considered equivalent to a master's thesis. And with that unwavering belief in the value of my research and my capabilities, Norm not only convinced me, which is similar to what Aisha was saying, of my own potential, but also championed my case for admission at the Institute of Communication Research. His endorsement was instrumental in securing not only my admission, but my financial aid for the first 3 years of my program. He also curated a beautiful cohort of like-minded scholars that allowed me to exponentially grow in all areas of my life as I was living my 20s doing this PhD. He was the curator by excellence, as we see from his numerous edited volumes, carefully curated cohorts, and conferences. Under his mentorship, I embarked on a profound journey of intellectual and personal growth, exploring the depths of feminist performance ethnography within my home in the Spanish-speaking Caribbean. Norman's guidance illuminated the path towards understanding the importance of depth, detail, emotionality, nuance, and coherence in research, allowing for the development of my own critical consciousness as a scholar. He allowed me to do an 11-chapter dissertation, to say that 7 of them were video chapters. He had never done a mixed media guidance for a mentorship, and he like embarked on it with me. And it was the time in which we were using CDs. So he was like, how am I gonna supposed to do this CD? It was a beautiful process of sort of like growing with media as media continued to change with us. He called abundance to be at the center of the table. And that's something I have taken with me everywhere I go. There were elaborate picnics in every class that we took. And I connected that eventually in my life to Paulo Freire's concept of conscientization. And we're able to connect some of those teachings to my activism, which is now deeply rooted in advocating for the political empowerment and cultural agency of queer, trans, two-spirit, Black, Indigenous, and people of color movements across the Spanish-speaking Caribbean and its diasporas. As a Puerto Rican Latinx scholar, my work in transfeminism, queer studies, and decolonial praxis aims to mentor students across various departments, guiding them towards embracing critical and transformative perspective. And I just have to say that I had no bigger cheerleader for me to do this than Norm Denzin. He was always cheering me on. And in all of our correspondence, he seemed to know my heart and my desire to combine activism and scholarship, sometimes even better than me, and always sort of like cheer me on towards that. My work, inspired by Norm's mentorship, seeks to embody this vision, leveraging power of feminist performance ethnography to foster critical consciousness and drive social transformation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Celiany. Our next presenter is Desiree Yomtoob from University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign.
Hi everybody. It's so good to be here with you all. And hi Aisha, Celiany, so lovely to see you. One thing that I was thinking about this morning was that Norm really, really loved having us around him and having us be with each other and then him being with us. So, so it was just really, really nice to be together again this morning. I just wrote a little thing that I'll present. We were asked as a group to each present a small work to remember and honor Norm and Denzin. Norm was a good friend, a soulful teacher, and a brilliant scholar. The thought that he is gone brings up a part of me that is inconsolable. I have deep, deep grief over losing him. The kind of moment and the environment in which the news of his passing arrived to me was one that I would not have imagined when I first understood the impact Norm's death would have for me. When I heard that Norm was ill, even at the first sight of him as a person with this disability, him with his walker at one ICQI conference, him in a chair but still active the next, and then him less active and in a chair the next. And then years later, the news that he had passed as it came to me in a text from a friend saddened me, but I was ready. I readied myself for Norm's eventual passing 20 years ago when I first started to work with Norm. And it became apparent the impact being in relationship with this person would have on me. It was the autumn of my second year of graduate school, and I had already worked with Norm for 3 years because I had done a 2-year trial period to get into the program. I came from working at the graduate library right across the way from Greg Hall, where Norm's office was. I had gotten into the program and was thrilled to be doing the kind of work I planned to do with Norm. It wasn't an easy adjustment. Me and him came from different kinds of worlds, but we grew close quickly, and he was such a nice man and a good friend. And one day, on one of my long walks out towards the country going south to the piece of restored prairie that is Meadowbrook Park, the light from the sun starting to set in the vast prairie sky was in my eyes. It was setting in the west on my right-hand side. I was having a conversation with myself. I can remember that walk, the sun brightly lighting the sky and all around me in a nuanced way as the low clouds in the sky drifted in the wind. It was a glorious day. This can be understood by Midwesterners from the area as one that comes so often in the fall. Days when you aren't really sure what to do with all of that beauty. I was reviewing different aspects of my life and thought about how happy I was to have Norm as a teacher. I felt lucky and blessed. And then a thought came up for me, and I answered that thought even before it was fully formed. If I was going to be close to Norm, I would have to accept the fact in advance that someday Norm would eventually pass. I felt sad about this for a moment, then accepted this reality. This moment happened for me in this way because 10 years earlier, on a day that looked very much like this day, but different in the spring, I received the news that my mother had passed away from suicide in a surprise phone call. The news was delivered by my uncle, who never called me, in three phrases. Desi, I have some news for you. Your mother attempted suicide, and unfortunately, she was successful, changing the idea of success for me for a lifetime. The loss for me was almost unbearable, though I did make it. Luckily, and this was part of my luck, luckily, I survived my mother's suicide. Luckily, I made it into the program. And luckily, I got to work with Norm. When my mom died, my second saving thought was the pain from the death of someone you love dearly, was part of the contract one made when one was blessed to have someone that they loved very much in their life. That's the contract. Those are the rules of life, of being in flesh and loving other people. So as Norm left this earth, I had been ready by this chain of experience. Since the sense of this loss is great, and still, the sense of this loss is great, and it being delivered in this moment, and what this moment is for me is strange, because who I was then and how I was living is quite different than the way the world feels to me right now. It's a fighting for a fierce hopefulness. It's a fighting for a fierce hopefulness time for me right now. And it was a hopeful me stepping delightfully into a rocket ship to the moon. Then I was so happy. I was hedging my affective bet. These days, I am playing in the puddle of the technology of hope. That's something I learned a lot about from Norm. Learning as that way of living, living as that way of learning. Theory, affect, pedagogy, embodiment. Norm was relentless in his work and play, joyful, and living his learning and learning his living. He knew a lot about this world and loved to share it. Brilliant and generous, and he had a great smile. Norm, bigger than life, only once in a while. Norm, a down-home country boy, most of the time. Norm, a really cool regular guy whose honesty is off the cuff, who is amazing, flawed, and real almost all the time. That's who he was to me. I never met anyone more real in my 60 years. And this was part of the gift of knowing him. Knowing someone that real brings constant grace. When I handed my finished dissertation to Norm, full of photos and poems and theory and even a hand-painted bit, he was very happy. And he paged through it, leaning back in his chair and smiling. And then he said, let's see what the last words are in your dissertation. And he flipped through the 400-page document with his large hands and put his finger on the last word and said, the last words are the stars. We both like that. Norm.
Thank you so much, Desiree. Our next panelist is Claudio Moreira, University of Massachusetts, Amherst.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Aisha, for bringing us together. I arrived at the University of Illinois in August of '99 with Danny and 2 suitcases. I arrived without any English. I was a janitor at that university for 2 years. Before that, my brother Marcelo talked to me about this professor he had, this Norman Denzin guy. I arrived at that universe, have no idea who he really was. My first encounter with Denzin was in August of 2001. I was a master's student. I had an appointment with him. I got there early, walked to see if the professor was there. I saw this older, at the time, white man in shorts walking around. I thought my fellow janitor is there. Janitors in the day shift could wear shorts for work. Few minutes later, the janitor got to the door and back inside his office. He was shoeless. We janitors were not allowed to work without shoes. Norman Denzin is my advisor, always, even now. Even now, years after I left Illinois, after his passing. In the beginning, Professor Denzin asked me to call him Norma. I just couldn't. I started calling him boss. Early too, I realized how blessed I was for having him in my life. Couldn't understand why this famous professor would work with me, the academic fraud, from my histories and geographies, from childhood poverty to beautiful campus, carrying my bad English and the open wounds in my body. From the immense feeling of not belonging to the impossibility of existing, and yet, boss create a space for me and many others to inhabit. Boss taught me to embrace the fraud and rise. Words are an exercise in memory. It's a never-ending looking back. It's the certainty that I would not be here without him. His own performance, his actions showed me possibilities of being and doing, of existing. His scholarship, work, life guide me. I've been trying to retrying to emulate, learn from, and dialogue with him and his body of work. Reading his works, writing my own. I hope I'm also exploring the possibilities of my own scholarship, create the words I want to inhabit. Writing creates the word we inhabit. Those are Norman Denzin's words. The scholarship I want to embody. I always have more questions than answers, and yes, he taught me how to live with that in a universe of experts. During the years I attend Professor Denzin grad seminar, I use the same yellow pad for note-taking. One of my first memories of attending that seminar, I arrived late and Aisha Durham was performing a poem honoring Juni Jordan. The professor was crying. I didn't know any of them, really, but I knew that was a space I want to be in. 7 years, always the same yellow pad. 3 things never changed on those 7 years. The yellow pad, Professor Denzin, and me. Around the time I was writing the theoretical section of my dissertation, I went to Denzin's office to talk with him. I showed him my yellow pad and said, boss, since I started taking your seminar, I took all my notes here. And please remember, my English was much worse in the first few years. I wrote a lot in this page. The problem is I don't know anymore what words are yours and what are mine. Like here, I pointed. I don't remember if you said that or if it's my own interpretation of what you are saying. The problem is that I don't know what to do. I don't want to misquote you or writing something that belongs to you as if it were mine. At this moment, Denzin interrupt me saying, those words are not mine, they are ours. This is a collaborative project. You go back to your office and write. Don't worry about any of this. These words are ours. To my boss, never alone, always writing. And probably my writing, with his blessing, is full of his words. Or should I say ours? More than 10 years later, I still have that yellow pad. Words written in pencil fading in those pages. Fragmented writing in two languages, sentence changed from Portuguese to English and vice versa. Mixing two languages, a word in Portuguese followed by a word in English. Fragmented words and memories. 7 years, 7 autumns, 2 bodies, 1 yellow pad. And he offered me his words. I still have that yellow pad, the tactile sensation of remembering, the reassurance of not being alone, of belonging, of having the right to be here speaking and there at the university teaching, of legitimacy. And some of the time, most of the time, after August, holding this page were the words written with pencil by my hand that are now fading. Holding the page, just to remember to be together, to remember you, to be together with you, never alone, always writing. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudio. Next panelist is Grant Kien, Cal State University, East Bay.
Thank you, everyone, for being here this morning. And thank you, Aisha. It's really an honor to be able to see all of your faces again. And there's just so many good memories from that community that we formed there. And Aisha, I haven't been able to cry about this until this morning. And I know that I should have been able to, and I just haven't been able to until now. And I think there's a lot to be said about this community to be able to come together and grieve like this. Celiany, you've always been the fulcrum of our cohort and my memories of Urbana-Champaign, and Desiree, your observation about Norm's love of people and students and just being surrounded is just so true and so heartwarming, actually, to remember that. And Claudio, I'll just never forget that car ride we took to Chicago together and talking through some of the toughest times of our lives, I think. And, you know, we're two people from different cities, first generation students in a farm town trying to learn how to be men in academia together. And thank you for also sending us Dr. Zenovich out here. It's been wonderful to to see you through her in that way. I tried to write something new, but I really couldn't. And so what I'm going to read is something that Michael accepted for the QI tribute. And so I'll just start with that here. It's a hot San Francisco Bay Area evening. Cars creep through families, couples, and individuals moving about the San Lorenzo Walmart parking lot, hand in hand. My spouse Anna and I flow through the stream of bodies entering the air-conditioned sanctuary. We pass the store greeter, a middle-aged white lady in a Walmart uniform who's too absorbed casually talking with the olive paramilitary uniformed armed security guard, a young brown-skinned man, to bother acknowledging anyone. So we make our way through the crowded lines of people waiting to pay and leave, joking in agreement. We're just taking a stroll, determined not to join these damned souls in the Walmart checkout line. At about the same time, Anna and I notice a tall, dirty-looking, middle-aged man ahead of us with the words Bay Arean tattooed with blue ink on the back of his bald head. He looks aggressively out of place among the predominantly Asian, Latinx, and Black families he is charging his way through. We're both jolted into silent rage. Our little air-conditioned stroll through Walmart is suddenly a battle against white supremacy. He insistently strides and makes a right turn down an aisle. Did you see that? Anna asks me. Where is he? We've got to follow him. Yes, I say. She continues, his tattoo says Bay Arean instead of Bay Area. Did you notice that? He can't just walk around like that. I've got to kick his ass, says Anna. Yes, I know. We went around this corner. I say, we pause, look down the aisle. We see him plow through a few bodies to take a left turn down the cross aisle. Anna tugs my hand to signal the urgency of her pursuit. I stop. Please don't, I say. I run the thought of physically confronting this piece of shit through my mind. Anna has type 1 diabetes and wears medical equipment, has debilitating arthritis in her hip and stiffness in her hands, preventing her from being able to fully close them. Forget about making a fist. Anna tends to think of me as invincible, but I'm hobbling around with crippling arthritis in one foot and still recovering from surgery in the other. The inability to physically defend ourselves makes me even angrier. Please don't, I repeat. It's exactly what he wants to provoke, that kind of confrontation. But I've got to kick his ass. That fucker can't just do that to people. I understand. I want to kick his ass too, but we just can't. And if we confront him, we're just playing his game. I say, contrary to my instincts, to ruthlessly root out and destroy white supremacy at every opportunity. We walk tensely, talking about how he looks like an ex-con, how this isn't the first time we've seen public hate like this in the Bay Area, how absurd it is that a white supremacist would just saunter through a space that is 90% or more occupied by non-white people, broadcasting his hate like that. And I get even more pissed off, saying that even if you pointed out to people this guy who would like to see them dead is standing right in front of them, no doubt most would just feign ignorance or shrug helplessness. I mull over the situation as we slowly walk a bit. I know what would get him, I say, feeling a bit better knowing I can hit him in his weakest opening. I can just ask him if he's really white. Like say, are you sure? You don't really look white to me. Put him on the defensive. It'll make him scared. You must be mixed, Anna adds, joining the thought experiment. Both of us imagine his growing perturbance with our challenge to the bedrock of his belief system. Yeah, that would probably get him. So let's go find him. That fucker hijacked enough of our time. Let's live our lives, I say, invoking the sentiment the best revenge is to live a good life. Anna agrees, commenting, yeah, I'm sure I would be the one who gets in trouble anyway. We both keep an eye out for him even so as we mill about a few minutes, then deem the building a hate-polluted environment and leave. We exited that building, drove away. The night ended, and we haven't seen that guy again up until now. But that's space, time, person, oppressive violence continues to reside in our minds. And now, in the words of my old professor, I have written us into history, told our own story in my own words. I found out Norm died the previous week. Like many, I was so shocked I could barely react. I watched the slow stream of comments on the ICR Facebook announcement that Professor Valdivia posted, helplessly rereading the moments other people told of experiences with him. I had too many to write any at all. Instead, I wrote general impressions, moments of his expression of himself rather than situations. That's what I wanted to keep alive, laughing, sharing, eating, discussing, dreaming, doing. His voice, words, images are my personal treasure of memories that I cannot share with anyone. Although paradoxically, I know they are somehow shared among us. Because you know what I mean. You have your own personal treasure as well. And when we stack these treasures together, we build a monument honoring an individual that had a tremendous impact on the world by making space and lifting others up. That is how I know Norman Denzin, the person, not a father nor brother, but more than a friend, always loyal and encouraging, always striving. And there's also Norman Denzin, the scholar, my professor. I sat next to Norm for 5 years, 4 or 5 days a week, 2 semesters a year. In fact, I first met him sitting in that creaking, wobbly chair, which I later had replaced despite his protests, where he made me feel important and wanted from the first greeting. He recruited me without ever standing up, and that was the casual nature of our relationship. After I graduated and moved on to my own faculty career, recruiting my own students, I wondered what he had seen in me and my student work that made him want me in that space. The dummy that I am, it took me an embarrassing amount of time to realize it was, of course, my writing. I think I'll just leave it at that because it does go on. But I do want to thank you all again that this has been cathartic in so many ways, and it reminds me of what our mission is, what Norm has prepared us for. Thanks again, Aisha, for putting this together.
Thank you, Grant. And thank you, Carolyn, for the invitation to have us come together to remember Denzin.
What an incredible panel and what an incredible moment. I think we all are, I can speak for everybody. We're all touched by this, and it's just a nice opportunity to pause and think about this great man, person, scholar, human being, and all that he did and continues to do for all of us, to give us hope that we could have a better world and we could contribute to that, making that world better. So thank you all for your presentations. We do have about 9 minutes. If there's anyone in the audience who would like to speak and say anything. Chris?
I just wanted to say thank you for that. I've often felt some envy that I was not one of his students. I first met Norman on the pages of the Handbook of Qualitative Research when I was a graduate student at the University of Denver in the middle 1990s. And when I read his work, I started reading all of it, and I sent him a piece I wrote in that qualitative methods class, and he published it immediately, which stunned me. As was so often his way, he wrote, when I would send him a piece, sometimes he would write such intensive editorial comments like, bravo. That was the whole email, which I did not know if that was an acceptance or what, but it turned out that it was. So I'd have to ask him, does that mean what I think it means? That kind of thing. And he would say, yes. I first got to meet him at ICQI in person, and I just wanted to share this. I was kind of starstruck, I'll have to admit, right? And he was in the Pine Lounge at the Illini Union, and he invited me to sit down next to him on the couch. And what was really almost surreal to me was I was thinking of him as the rock star in the room, but he treated me as if I was that guy. And I was like kind of stunned. So I like to imagine him now sitting on that same couch with my friends Bud Goodall and Nick Trujillo, who left us in 2012. That's how I like to see him, but I also see him and hear his voice here in this Zoom room, and I believe Norman is with us and smiling. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I also share that envy that, hey, I wanted to be one of his students too. And I always had the sense that somehow his students perhaps knew him better than the rest of us did. So I envied that as well, in a wonderful, positive way. Anybody else like to say anything?
I just want to say that whenever I mention to people that only know Norm through books, that I had no idea that I was stumbling upon this star when I met him as a 20-something-year-old. They're like, wow. And the remembrance that we have of Norm as a person, as a cookie monster, like as somebody who really, really, really love a good conversation. And the bravo that somebody mentioned was powerful. Oh my God, he said that word all the time. Powerful, powerful. This is great. This is powerful. And I just really resonated, like my whole body vibrated with something that Claudio said. Claudio, I miss you. I love you. Te extraño.
I miss you too, querida.
Claudio said, it is the certainty that I would not be here without him. That I think that a lot of us resonate and vibrate with that. And I'm so thankful to have this opportunity to remember him.
Thank you. I did just want to note that Kathy is here, his wife and partner, and thank you, Kathy, for joining us in this wonderful moment.
Good morning, Dr. Ryan. That's something about Norm as well. He always called you Dr. Ryan.
Yes.
Yes, he would never use your first name around us. He just had so much care and respect in how he spoke about you. And that I've always carried with me, in fact. And Celiany, when you say powerful, that just reminds me of those quirks and how we used to joke about them together. And even to this day, when somebody says something I've done is good, I ask them, yeah, but is it powerful? I think
Welcome.
say something here.
I just want to say two quick things that I thought in putting in my talk, but I have been being hard at time to write. Two things impressed me about Norman Denzin, the scholar. I remember two stories. One, he had a ritual, I think on Wednesday afternoon, he'll go to the porch and drink his iced tea and listen to this program. And he would remember his time as a grad student at the University of Iowa, the grad student lounge. And he telling this and writing this story said that then his student, Aisha Durham, asked him What about Black folks there? How many Black folks there? Something along those lines. And then a famous professor writes and tells that he has to rethink his own trajectory, his own memory. We don't see that often in academia. Some years later, we are in the ISQI, a big panel with Soini Madison, with big name. The room was full. He was talking, and he started talking, saying that the words of Dan Hancock has made him to rethink his last works and books on the West Indians. Dan Hancock was a native master student. So reread the words of a master student. He acknowledged his words, and he said that he had to tear his papers and rewrite everything else. We all been in academia for so long. We all been in this world. How many professors of that stature would be that open to rethinking? And I mean, it's not the words of name the famous, it's word of grad students. That's the embodiment of Freire pedagogy. I mean, he was paying attention to what grad students are saying and rethinking. I never saw it. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but I never saw it. I wish I could be that person. I'm fine that I'm not. It's impressive. It's just that. Sorry.
Thank you. We have time for one more last word. Anybody want a last word? Aisha, Kathy, anyone want to say anything? Mitch? Other students? Well, this was just fantastic, just wonderful. What a lovely, lovely way to start our conference. I can't imagine a better way. So thank you to all the panelists, to Aisha in particular, for putting it together and for all your words and love and care. It just reminds me of what a loving and caring community that we have. And we want to just continue to take care of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aisha.
Thank you. Thank you.